Hello and welcome to the Catholic Mom Book Club. We are finishing up our current book, A Beautiful Second Act, Saints and Soul Sisters Who Taught Me to Age with Grace, with author Maria Johnson, who's also part of our Catholic Mom Family Rosary. Actually, we're kind of now called Family Rosary, and Catholic Mom has become part of our Family Rosary USA team, and she is on it, and we're so thrilled to be with you all again. Today, we're finishing up with chapters 7, 8, 9, and 10. If you want to find out more about the other chapters that we talked about or Catholic Mom in general, we send you to catholicmom.com. But since we have so much to do, Allison will stop with the introductions and let's jump right in. So, chapter 7, we meet Mother Dolores Hart, known famously for kissing Elvis on screen. I love that story. And Maria Antonia.
De Paz y Figueroa.
Yeah, you see how I didn't go more than that. And I struggled with the two easy ones. And
Well, she's got an easier name, Mama Antula.
That's not easier for me, but
Oh.
okay. So let's jump into this. Where do you want to start? Want to start with Mother Dolores?
Yeah, let's start with Mother Dolores because it's such a cool story. She was an actress, and Dolores Hart. And I think that we've all kind of at some point in the Catholic social media world seen something about her because she very famously kissed Elvis, and it was his first on-screen kiss. So that was, what a great conversion for her to run to the monastery after that.
That's very funny.
Apparently, he actually wanted to date her, and she was like, "No, we are co-workers." And so clearly, she did have, she was already headed toward the convent and to a conversion to Catholicism. She was not raised Catholic. And but she was drawn to the Catholic faith so much so that she had asked as a little girl, she had asked her mother to let her go to Catholic school. So it's an interesting story there. But, she was a Hollywood actress. And it's kind of funny. I didn't intentionally pick another Hollywood actress because we start the book with Hedy Lamarr. But she was on her way to be a big star. And in the whirlwind that was making movies in the 50s and 60s, she would retire to this monastery in Connecticut where she could just get some spiritual rest from the world. Nice. And that's where she ended up.
I love getting spiritual rest. And I think that's important lesson, just to kind of a little aside, to make time for that in your own life. Like, find a place to have your own little domestic shrine, your own little domestic retreat place, monastery, so to speak. For me, I've stolen my husband's office. He's got a little nice comfy couch, a little tiny couch, and a little fake fireplace. And there's nothing in there of mine except for the books that I keep piling up on his floor. It's like,
your TBR pile, it looks like mine.
Well, I'm actually one of those people who reads a little bit of a book at a time. So I'm literally reading like 5 books at once. I don't know, maybe it's my ADHD, Maria, but I can only read this is the furthest I've gotten through a book in this short a time in reading your book in a very long time. I think it's really important because that's how she found herself, right? That's how she found her true vocation, was that she found a place to be quiet and to listen to God. And I think that's one of the tricks of the devil, right? That he keeps us so busy and keeps noise so loud in our ears that we never make time to hear God call us to our first act, never mind our second act.
That's right. And one of the things that she talks about in her biography is how she would walk out in the fields at this convent. And it's for me, walking in nature, connecting to natural sounds instead of all of the electronic buzz that we have, whether or not we're hearing it, we're exposed to the buzz of the light and the buzz of feedback in our earbuds. When we work in this industry, we're in a lot of tech all the time, and so getting out and seeing the sun helps you to see the sun.
Oh, I love that. I agree with that 100%. So there was a story. I'm just making little notes as I'm reading, and of course, it's been a week since I read it. Um, was it Mother Dolores that was somebody was knitting loudly?
Yes.
And I was like, "This is my woman. This is my soul sister. I can't handle chewing loudly. I can't handle wrestling of papers, and loud knitting would have sent me over the edge."
That's so funny. Yeah, that's a great story. They were having a meeting. They were having like a meeting in the convent about things that they had to do, and one of the older sisters was knitting in a corner and was not appreciating the direction that the meeting was going in, and was just clacking the knitting needles together, and it set off Mother Dolores, and she had to leave, and she had to go walk in the field. So there you go.
Yes, this is totally my soul sister. I couldn't laugh. I just couldn't. It made me feel so good about myself. I think that's one of the things, Maria, your book, A Beautiful Second Act, does for me, and also your Badass Book of Saints. The things that it does is it shows me that these women were regular,
Yeah,
ordinary women who, like me,
absolutely.
got aggravated at knitting needles or like just little things or big things in their life, but yet they still led holy lives. They still were able to follow Christ. And in some of the instances for the women you share, they become saints. And I love that. Um, that that ability that could be me one day, like that optimism, that affirmation, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But what about Mama Antula?
Yeah, there you go. Saying that one instead of Maria Antonia de Paz y Figueroa. She was an Argentinian woman, and let me tell you that I'm not. I, I don't want to sound like a super ultra feminist, but a lot of the women in the book are women who sought their own agency in
Mm,
times when women didn't have much. And in her story, her father was kind of an overbearing guy who had a huge, I guess by our standards, we would call it a plantation. And he had a lot of the local natives of the indigenous people of Argentina working on those fields. And Mama Antula, little Maria Antonia, would leave in the mornings and go and seek out her friends among the children of the workers. And so she was pretty much raised by these women who taught her so much about life and work. And at the end of the day, they'd be looking for Maria Antonia, and where was she? She was out with, playing with the children. And her father didn't like that, and she didn't like that her father didn't like that, and she was like, no, this is not the way. This is not the way it should be. And so he, of course, as people in those kinds of positions, wanted her to marry well. By that, I mean to marry into a like-minded group of people that would be, financially and socially and culturally elevated. And she said, no, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to get married and then be beholden to some man in the same style that my mother is, like you. And that's crazy, right? She was
yeah.
15. Um, but she was raised in a very Catholic environment, and I grew up with the faith and had an authentic faith. But she didn't want to be a nun either, because she didn't want to be beholden to a superior. Uh,
I'm seeing a pattern here, Maria. I'm
she
seeing a
was
pattern.
she was pretty rebellious. So what she did was she joined a group of consecrated women uh, to, to, to do the work of the poor and to do the work of spiritual instruction. She was very Ignatian. She loved Ignatian spirituality, and in fact, worked with the Jesuits throughout her life
Mm.
in order to bring this Ignatian spirituality to the people. So hers is a kind of a story of rebellion, but there you have it, with a real heart for the common people.
Well, then we move on to chapter 8 when we meet two compassionate caregivers. And I love that you included Rosalind Carter. Maybe
Yeah.
it's just it was such a part of my own upbringing and my, lots of memories. And I don't know how you say her last name.
I say Jean Juven.
Oh,
because
that's what I said.
in
Okay.
English, but it's probably Jean Jugan.
It's like my last name is in French, Gingras, and we say Gingras. I
No.
always say if you drink too much gin, you end up on the grass. That's how you say
Oh
my last
boy,
name.
that's
So
one way
other
to
than
do it.
well, and people don't forget it. So anyway, let's start with Rosalind, who just we just lost
Did you?
Ginny this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she died last year. I love Rosalind because she was everybody's mother that I grew up with. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I went
Ah.
to Christ the King Elementary School, the Cathedral School. I was taught by the Grey Nuns of the Sacred Heart, and because it was the Cathedral School. It was in a kind of a fancy area, part of Atlanta, and so I was able to learn about American culture, and by that I mean I learned about Southern culture through my friends and their mothers, because we would have parties, or I would go play dates at their houses. I learned the secret to good Southern sweet tea, which is saccharin, not sugar. I mean, this was
Oh.
in the 70s, okay? Let's just be clear.
Okay.
But these women uh, they were strong women, very strong women, but it was a kind of low key, very, very quiet, very, very demure, very,
Mm.
very humble strength. And so these were the moms that I knew, and my own mother was the very same way because of her own old world Spanish upbringing. And so maybe that's just the way mothers were in the 70s. I don't know. But I had such an attraction to Rosalind Carter's work because she reminded me of these mothers, of these women. And so really it's about a kind of spiritual motherhood where
Mm.
her interest was, I mean, she absolutely supported Jimmy Carter in all that he did, but she cared for a number of people who were ill in her family, and so she had a very firsthand knowledge of what it means to be a caregiver
Mm.
and the kind of respite that caregivers need. And so I think that the greatest thing that she did was the foundation of her own organization for caregivers to support them, to provide education for them, and to provide respite. And so for me, it was just a beautiful thing that was personal. I'm a caregiver now, but I watched my own mother be caregiver to my
Yeah.
dad, in his final year with cancer. And so I understand this need for respite. And so I think it's a beautiful thing, but it was done so demurely, so quietly. And I hate what's the social media thing about demure and so demure and I don't know, whatever. There was some little trend there, but that's how I would characterize her. I
Mm.
never got to meet her, but I had gone very often enough to the Carter Center in Atlanta
Oh, neat.
to see. I mean, that's where Carter's library is, and but there's a lot of the stuff that Carter's did together. I think that there's a lot of a lot of criticism of his presidency, but his post presidency work was just exceptional. I helped to build houses for Habitat for Humanity. These are things that I grew up with, and
Yeah.
so it deeply, deeply moved me to re-encounter her at this season of my life to see the work that she did.
Isn't it interesting that like the legacy continues, but the further it gets away from its genesis, you forget who actually starts it.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Until you just said that, I forgotten it's the Habitat for Humanity genesis. So that's really neat. And pair her with Jean, whose last name I'm
John.
not, yeah, just not going to work on. So what was the connection there? Why would you put those two together?
Well, Sister Jean founded the Little Sisters of the Poor, and that is also a beautiful, beautiful charism for these sisters that they work with the elderly and the sick, and they care for them in very much the same way that on the other side of the world, Mother Teresa. was working in India, but she was not in the spotlight. And her story is really a story of humility. She's quoted as saying that she wants to be very, very small before the
Mm.
Lord. So she becomes small so that he becomes large. And, the scripture, I must decrease so he can increase. That kind of thing is very important to
Mm.
Sister Jean. But you talk about just being stripped of any kind of recognition for work. She became very, very small, literally, because when she founded the Little Sisters, the Sisters of the Poor, the local priest who was her spiritual director kind of usurped the organization, and and it started because she was very poor, and so she worked with the poor. She was actually taken in by the woman that she was caring for,
Mm.
and when the woman died, bequeathed her a little bit of money so that she could get a larger apartment and bring other like-minded women to work with her to serve the poor and to serve
It's
the
beautiful.
ill. So it's a beautiful story, but it's incredible on the humility scale, because this priest like took the organization from her and demoted her and installed someone that could be I think, I mean, it's an awful situation, but that could be manipulated as the
Mm.
superior of the organization. And the incredible thing is that the more she was squashed in the organization, the bigger accolades that she got, because the work that she did was with the people, and so she lived her life kind of in exile, and it was at the end of her life where an investigation by the Vatican discovered that part of it had been, well, that most of it had really been an ugly move, and the priest was removed, and she was like, I don't need anything. The Lord knows the work that I did. Everything else is irrelevant. So
That's
that's really
beautiful.
something to ponder in terms of our own littleness, and it's so important for us in the
Yes.
work that we do, because we're out there talking to people, um, you know, uh, working in ministry, trying to sell books, and there's no escaping the fact that that we do need to market our work, and that we do want to sell books, but at what point does ego
Mm.
overtake the true mission, which is to to work for the kingdom. And
Yeah.
so she's a great lesson in that kind of humility, that we don't need that attention. What we need is to shine that light on Christ.
Right. And I think, like, for me personally, when I finally, like 15 years in, took a step back and remembered why I was doing what I was doing and who I did it for, that's when the doors opened, and
Mm-hmm.
like we just said, like Sister Jean said, God knows what I need. Well, God knows who needs whatever it is He's put on my heart to write. I always say that I'm not an author; I'm the Holy Spirit stenographer, and
I like that.
and he knows who needs to see this, and it really changed my perspective. Doesn't change the world, that I still need to do that work.
Sure.
It's the same thing that Sister Jean needed to do the work, but I think two people, moving on to chapter 9, a nice little somewhat seamless move, is these spiritual visionaries. I have to tell, this chapter is about Saint Josephine Bakhita and Saint Faustina, and I love both of them. And I wanted to start with Sister Faustina because I have to tell a really funny story. So I I wear a necklace that it has, your Catholic swag on it, right? Like, I have a cross and a metal scapula, and of course my miraculous medal, and I've worn it for at least 15 years so far, if not longer. Um, and we had these visiting relics come to our church, and the priest who was giving the presentation said, we were at the church. He goes, "We're going to go over to the parish center." And we go over there. One of these saints is going to want to be your friend. And he goes, "I have no idea how they're going to make themselves your friend, but just know they're going to be they will make themselves known that they want to be on this journey of life with you, as your spiritual guide. And my friend and I were just like, yeah, whatever, kind of rolling our eyes at each other. And this was kind of early in my reversion, so I was still pretty skeptical of the whole Catholic devotional things, especially these um these relics, like we're going to go like venerate, which obviously is not the same as worship, these bones and pieces of their clothes and hair. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. But I'm like, but I was fascinated. So of course I wanted to be a part of it. So long story short, I go over and there's like 200 reliquaries set up, these little tiny, I call them little tiny monstrances, but little, they're just they're called tekla, actually is the fancy word for them, and they're set up. And so we just kind of go up and down the aisles, and I noticed people around me were picking it up, the little tekla, and then blessing themselves and then touching whatever they had to it. So I had my necklace. I'm like, well, all right, I'll use my necklace. So I go through maybe like 100 of them, and then I get to Saint Faustina. And I had already started learning a little bit about Saint Faustina, and I had been working towards the adoption of my daughter from China, and I'd kind of read a little bit about her, and kind of been praying a little bit to her for some of the things that we needed to happen. Anyway, I finish, I pick her up just like I picked up all the other 150. I bless myself. I touch her to my necklace, touch the relic to my necklace, and I go to put it down. And somehow I'm completely entangled
Oh.
with St. Faustina. And my friend, who is now not trying to help me, but laughing hysterically and trying to get out her phone, and all these people around are praying and crying and like just so in the moment. And the two of us are Lucy and Ethel, like cracking up, trying to get myself untangled. I'm like, he told us we couldn't take her home. Like, you can't take this. You have to help me. So we finally get ourselves untangled. Fast forward, and my friends Emily Geminette and Michelle Fendlay are writing a book about Faustina. Our friend Faustina was the name of the book. And I had written a quick blog about how in that moment I knew Faustina was my friend, and started praying to her on the regular, kind of adding the Divine Mercy to my daily prayer. In my research, they asked me to contribute to one of the chapters. And here's the whole point of the story, because I think it just makes the saints from heaven just really are truly our friends, and it just gives them that humanity. So in my research to write about Faustina, I found a biography, and in it I found this little quote from her neighbor, and it said simply, if Faustina had not become a nun, she could have been a comedian.
No way.
Yahweh. And I was like, yes. And apparently she would have loved Lucy. I love Lucy. And
Oh my goodness.
there is my Faustina story. I know it's a little long, but it was so worth it, because like, we just have to see. And I love, like, that's what a beautiful second act does. It gives them humanity. It gives them these these real emotions and sense of humor, because you don't see saints as being funny. But she was 100% behind my little antics of being completely entangled with a saint. So, why is it that you included Saint Faustina in your book?
They come at us, the saints. They really
Oh yeah,
do.
they do.
They just do. Can I tell you that she's in this book because I don't my father was very devoted to the Divine Mercy Chaplet. And so much so that his little prayer card when he died was the closing
Oh
prayer
wow,
to the yeah on the back.
beautiful.
So I don't know. We printed so many of them, and somehow I ended up in possession of all of these prayer cards that were left over. What do you do with prayer cards?
I've not figured that out yet.
And because these are commemorating his his death, it's not like I can put them out on a table for people to collect. So so they have become bookmarks for me.
Oh, that's funny.
Because whatever, I mean, I have had dollar bills as bookmarks, things like that. But these particular Divine Mercy cards have become bookmarks for me. And so I think that she spoke to me. She says, "Hey, I want to be in your book," because I would open books and out would come these little prayer cards, and I'm like, "Okay, Pop, I get it. I
Oh,
get it. We're
that's
going to put her in.
funny.
We're going to
Oh,
put
I
her
love it.
in the book." So that's how she ended up in the book.
Yep.
Um, but the whole concept of divine mercy,
Yeah.
that we have a merciful God, that we have a Lord who wants us, who wants us to know him, and that, the whole idea of forgiveness. I'm going to veer off on a different tangent here, but I was just recently talking about Jennifer Fulwiler's biography, where she tells a story about her father, who was an atheist. And if people don't know Jen's story, she was an atheist that was converted to the faith through online dialogue, which is really interesting. And when her father was in his final days, she'd had a conversation with him because he was still atheist. And she says,
Wow.
when you die, if Jesus holds his hand out to you, please take it.
Oh,
And
wow.
and so he promised her that he would. And so that's an interesting thing for me to recognize that, on earth, as we think about all of the people that are close to us, maybe that have fallen away from the faith or that don't have a strong faith, that, Christ's mercy is so great
Mm.
even in that final moment, he's reaching his hand out to us. And so I absolutely wanted to include that, and I would encourage people to read her diary that Jesus gave to her. He
Yeah.
gave her this missive to create this devotion. And we're all familiar with the picture of Jesus with and is he holding his hands out? I think that he is. Now that I think about it, I see this picture so much that I don't see it anymore. Um, but
He's
with
got a
the rays
hand
of
there.
mercies, right? With
Yep.
the rays of mercy coming from him, and so,
He's
the
offering up
blood and
nothing, and
water.
he's touching
Yeah,
his heart. Yeah. I'm looking at it right now. It
yeah.
happens to be on my wall right in front of me. So I
So
can tell you exactly what it looks like. Yes.
so this call to mercy, this call that he forgives us. He's forgiven us ahead of time. We need to own that, and we need to really come to him with true penitence. Anyway, it's such an important part for us, I think. And the older that we get, we become these rosary clacking ladies, and it's not because, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, but it's not because we're old and thinking about dying. It's because although memento mori, yes, is important, but that because we get older and wiser, and
Amen.
as we begin to really really understand our faith, we really recognize how important it is to pray.
Yes, and that diary is such a great guide for life. There's a place where she's, like, pouring out her heart, and Jesus says to her, "You're right, you are misery itself." But then he goes on to say, "But it pleases me that you've turned to me," right? Like, and he goes, "You do what you can in the matter, and I
Yes,
will do the rest." And I love that, but, like, doesn't sugarcoat it. Like, "You're right, girlfriend, you
you
are
are a hot
miserable,
mess.
but guess what? I can do wonders with that hot mess." So how about Saint Josephine?
Well, I think that it's beautiful to pair this call for mercy, or this understanding of mercy, with forgiveness on earth. When you pray the Our Father, it's kind of startling when, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Yeah.
We can't go ask for this mercy if we're unwilling to do it ourselves for others. And oh my gosh, I think that Saint Josephine is like the poster saint for forgiveness. This is a
Mhm.
woman who was kidnapped as a child, and sold into slavery multiple times before she finally landed with a family that moved her away from Africa into Italy, that that she was supported in being set free, because Italy did not allow for slavery at the time. And so, yeah, so her story, and she became a nun. She found Christ, and I think that she's famous for having said, that she was grateful for her captors,
Yeah.
and she forgave them, because had she not been taken, she never would have found Christ. But here's the thing: and this is, I think, such a beautiful story also about all of humanity, right? That she knew there was something greater than herself, And from a very early age, she would look at the world with wonder and know that there was something that had created all of this for her, for us, and to have encountered God finally in her young adulthood, to know who he was, I think was a very, very beautiful story.
Very inspiring. I absolutely encourage people to not just read about her in A Beautiful Second Act, but go out and read her biography.
Yeah,
Or
it's
this
incredible.
she's incredible human being. The last chapter, chapter 10, inspired mentors, which I think is just apropos because many people don't know this, but Maria is my mentor. She she got me through my first book with so many of these emails and calls of crying and there's no way I could write this. Why did I think I could? And she was just the voice of reason, the voice of calm, just getting me through. And so as I finished book number 6 just a few months ago, I just can't help but just thank you so much, Maria, for all you do, for putting yourself. And you sent me a rock in the middle of all of this that says, with God, all things are possible, from Matthew's gospel. And I keep it here still all these years later. When I am struggling with anything, I look and I go, I can't do, I am indeed misery itself. God, but God can do all things. That everything's possible with Him. So I love that you ended your book with mentors. So now you tell us about the mentors you shared. Now that I've shared my one of my favorite
Oh
mentors.
my goodness. Let me tell you that this was a fun chapter because I remembered, and we're in the middle of March Madness now, and so we were watching March Madness, a Loyola game years ago, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and there was this nun who came on the scene, and she was the chaplain for the Loyola men's basketball team, and she was so hilarious. She gave, I played basketball all of my childhood into my young adulthood. And, when you play in a Catholic setting, you always say the prayer before the game, and you always end it with Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. So that I saw her praying with these guys was cool, and that they were televising it was even cooler.
Yeah.
This nun gave a scouting report within the prayer, and that so and so who's may you be able to capitalize on so and so's weakness, or from the left, or so. It was just
That's great.
absolutely charming. And because I had played basketball, I had an affinity for her. But Sister Jean, and I think she passed away last year. Was
No, no, I
she
checked it
still
out.
alive?
She's 105. She's still kicking.
Holy smokes!
I looked before yeah, just a week ago she was alive and she's 105.
She's so this woman has had like 5 or 6 acts in her life, because yes, because every time that she would think that she was done, they would call her out of her retirement to do something else. So she
Wow.
started off, as so many of the women that I am drawn to as educators. I'm a retired educator. Do we ever retire from that? No.
No.
um, you know Thank you for your kind words about mentoring. I think that I'm still teaching. I think, when I work with our contributors, I'm still teaching. um,
Yeah.
so anyway, she became like a dean, and then tried to retire, and they called her out of retirement and said, we need you to go and do this program, which was a demotion for her. And she was like, yeah, I'm in. And so she went and did that at the university. And
Wow.
then, yeah, and then she retired again, and they called her back and they said, you know what, we need somebody that's going to be able to um, give the men and women's basketball teams academic support. And so, can you do tutoring, or can you do some kind of lead them in study halls and stuff? Like, she stepped up to do that, and then she ended up as the chaplain of their teams. So every turn in your life is an opportunity for a new act. And so I chose her for the conclusion of the book, because she has lived, I guess she's still alive. She was working right up, and I think she was 102 the last time that she appeared, um,
That's crazy.
with the team. And so I paired her with someone who didn't live a long life,
Yeah.
Elizabeth, Saint Elizabeth of the Trinity, and she
And
died at
before we
26. Go ahead.
And Susan, before we jump into St. Elizabeth, I just want to mention that Wake Up with Purpose, what I've learned in my first 100 years, that I had to go out and buy it
Did
right
you buy
away.
it?
Of course I did. Of course I did. It was Sister Jean's. I don't if it's a biography, an autobiography. I didn't actually get to that point yet, but it must be an autobiography because she
Autobiography.
said what I learned.
Yeah.
Um, it was, and it's a picture of her. I'm pretty sure that she's at a game with like the Loyola
Yeah.
scarf on. Anyway, so I highly recommend that book. And the Saint Elizabeth of Trinity, I discovered with Claire Dwyer's book, which is probably one of the best written books about a saint, specifically on one saint that I've ever read. She's just so gifted and talented. Okay, enough of my. I'm always adding to people's to be read list. That's just my job. I
Well,
can't help myself.
that was a good book. But so was Elizabeth of the Trinity, and I was really drawn to her because, um, one, I wanted to make sure that we understood that our second acts are not necessarily for old people, for mature women. I know that happens to be the demographic that I tend to write for, but it's really a book for everyone who is encountering any kind of second act. As we move through life, we always have opportunity for change and renewal. Um, I mean, Saint Paul famously had a deep conversion and changed the trajectory of his life when he encountered Christ. But whether we're entering into a marriage or beginning, to start a family or changing jobs or moving to a new place, all of these are opportunities for new acts, maybe new chapters in our life. And I think that what's astonishing about St. Elizabeth is that she died so young, but she left so much
Yeah.
that it's as if her second act is really coming to us from heaven in her capacity
Mm.
as a saint to intercede for us. And the reason that I love her and the reason that I end the book with her is that she had a beautiful correspondence with her superior, and her superior was having some great difficulty with transition, and she said to her, "Let yourself be loved."
Mm.
And I mean, I want to end with that. Let yourself be loved. So much of the work that we do, and so much of the path that we take, the journey that we take in this life, is really should be geared towards looking heavenward. Um, and we fight the love that is in our lives, either from our friends, our circle of influence, our family, but most of all, God. And so really, that's if I want to just cap it off with something, it would be Saint Elizabeth's words: "Let yourself be loved."
I love it. Uh, we have been talking for the last 3 weeks about a beautiful second act, Saints and Soul Sisters Who Taught Me to Age with Grace by Maria Johnson. This is from Ave Maria Press. You can find out more on CatholicMom.com, and please stay tuned in the next few months for the announcement of our May spring book club. We're very excited to bring you that as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you for listening, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Maria.
Always a pleasure. God bless